call the February 27, 2020 meeting of the Grafton Sustainability Commission to order. So the first item on the agenda tonight was to go over the draft of the benchmarking report that I have. But as part and parcel of that, I want to break up the discussion about that into two discrete points. First, obviously the benchmarking report is derived from data that we collected. And there are some questions about whether or not there were some apples to apples comparisons in our data sheet for a couple of the items. So for instance, as we were just talking about offline a second ago, full-time employees for communities aren't always described the same way. Some communities list within their data people who are only W-2s and traditionally use maybe different definitions than what we do. So part of the issue is having to comb through numbers that don't seem quite right and find out why exactly it is that those numbers aren't quite right. So Barry, I know that you had noted a couple of inconsistencies, and are there particular items that you want to talk about?
No.
Okay. What were you concerned about?
That I dug out all of this data from DOR, DLS, Census.gov, and a couple of others. And I'm never 100% certain that I'm copying it all correctly, that the numbers are adding up correctly, that the formulas are right. And I don't want to go through the exercise fiasco that I went through the last time, where somebody said, well, the numbers are wrong.
Okay.
So I'm asking for others to eyeball it or add it up or go up to the GSC, the Google Doc page and bring it down and look at it and see if the numbers that have been dug up for the other towns are match all of this.
Okay. So I've done part of that, and I don't have an issue with the numbers that you brought up.
Okay.
I think the issue, to the extent that there is an issue, there's always a slight inconsistency between what DOR has listed for some data
Yes.
and what individual communities have listed for some data. I went out of my way in the introduction to the benchmarking report to say, use with caution.
Yeah.
Okay? If we're going to make apples to apples comparisons, I want it to be DOR across the board for all our benchmarking communities, or Department of Education across the board for all our benchmarking communities. Or rather, for the DOE list, everybody's going to get their data from DOR for income, expenses, demographic information, things like that. I think the thing that I was getting a little bit concerned about as I was doing the report itself was when we go through and we start to make qualitative analysis about what these numbers mean. Because a lot of this stuff, for instance, some of this data is FY 2018, some of this stuff is FY 2019, some of this stuff is FY 20. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
So, again, I don't have a problem ranking communities if we're using all of the data from all the seniors. Let me give you, for instance, if I were to say that Grafton spends, X percentage of its budget on recreation, and that is higher than most of our benchmarking communities.
Right.
I don't have a problem with that if all of the benchmarking communities that we're using are all FY 2018, because that was the last data available.
Yes.
Okay, I don't have a problem with that. But I do want people to I do want people to know that there's a caveat. Like, okay, this was the last data available. So unless something crazy happened in a lot of these benchmarking communities that would have upped their spend on recreation, for instance, then those numbers should be fairly accurate. We should get a clear enough picture of where we rank relative to other communities if we're using a consistent set of data points. But at the same time, when we go and turn around and talk about how much money we're spending on education, as a percentage of our budget, for instance, we're going to want to use this year. You know what I mean? It doesn't, especially going into a year where there's potentially an override, doesn't really make any sense to use FY 2018 data for that. We would want to use the most recent stuff, which was,
Unless you're doing a growth rate calculation, then you
Right.
have to look back.
right, that's right.
And I say that because that's what we have.
That's right. But other than that, I was pretty comfortable with it. I didn't see anything other than that employee issue. There was nothing that jumped out at me that was inaccurate. If people want to say, well, you're not using our data, using DORs, that fine, okay, that's true. And so, insofar as it goes.
Yeah, and the justification for that is, well, you mentioned it. The DOR collects or gets that information submitted by the municipalities.
Right.
They're not making it up.
Right.
And when you go in and actually find a usable budget book for another town, which is a real exercise, and you look at it, you will often find the numbers in there are a little different from the numbers on the DOR.
Right.
And that goes back to the issue that these numbers do change
Right.
over time. Our Grafton budget book comes out fresh in January, and we're on the third version of it already.
Right.
Small differences, but after town meeting in May, it'll be revised. And then at the close of the business year, it'll be revised, it should be. And then finally, when free cash and all that is certified in October, that's like 6 versions. So which one are we looking at on the DOR?
Right,
That's
so-
why I think using DOR numbers and not necessarily town numbers makes the most sense.
Refresh my recollection, does DOR have FY 20 numbers?
20, yes. For the most part, they do.
Because we're still in FY 20. How do they have
They
actuals?
wouldn't have final actuals, they might have a
Well-
proposed budget.
Yes.
Right.
Well, the other thing is that we're using, town population data, 2015 was the last data that we have for that.
Right,
So
for
now
census
we're,
data.
it's been 5 years.
Except I went to census.gov, and they had numbers from 2020.
Okay, well, maybe we should replace our information then in our school side spreadsheet, because I marked it on the spreadsheet, what year each thing is.
Okay.
Well,
Because I was aware.
municipalities do censuses each year, so if you go to the local town clerk's office, that's the most up-to-date, accurate population as of the last census that the town clerk does.
Yeah, so
All right,
I contend, as an example, if you use the population numbers, and I found census.gov had 2020 numbers, and it gives you a breakdown of how many seniors, how many under 18, et cetera. For all 12 towns, that's going to be consistent numbers.
Yeah.
Now, what did I have for Grafton? 18,762? Is that the perfectly exact count of people we have in Grafton? Well, it's darn good enough to compare us with the other towns.
Yeah, I would agree
Yeah.
with that.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
I think you're right, I think as long as the source is the same, and we had that struggle with the school side stuff, like a lot of the numbers that we're trying to get at are not reported by a DESI.
Oh, ouch.
So we have to use self-reporting, we just have to note, these are self-reported numbers. For example, the special education percentage of students in program. The number, the DESI reports for us is a lot lower than it actually is,
Oh,
because of the way they define what that means, and the way
Okay.
we define what that means. And so for an accurate expense for special education, you have to have the right number. So we'll be using self-reported numbers, and a lot of that's not available online. We're having to ask the districts to tell us,
yeah,
because they don't publish it,
yeah.
so.
What you don't see jumping out at you here is exactly where I went to get this, the full URL.
Right,
Yeah.
I have those in notes attached to the cells.
okay.
I saw that.
But what I
Yeah, we have
thought
some
was
too.
I would pull it out of there, and I think I did it toward the end of this chunk of data. And I started to put it in as a full line item, so in case you really, really, really want to challenge the numbers, okay, you can do that.
Okay. I think that's fair. And I think when we post this online, is there a way to hyperlink to that on the site so that people, if they want to dig into it, could? Probably.
Should be able to.
Can, can you put this spreadsheet and make it downloadable? Why not?
Yeah, well, I don't know.
I understand your concern. Because right now, we have it on the GSC,
Right.
and not everybody in town has access to Google Docs.
Yeah, I don't want to do it as we go, because this is still a draft document. I want to get something that we vote on and put it out there. But when we put it out there, I, to the extent that there are hyperlinks that people can click on to go to the data themselves and see it, I prefer that. So we can do that.
So one of the things that I just noticed, if you go to page 2, bottom, you have school budget FY 2018,
Aha.
Yeah,
and we have FY 20 operating budget
yes.
and the percentage. And so in the school document, we actually have the 2020 budget numbers for our
Okay.
sister districts, I guess you'll call them, but obviously not all of them. Because
Okay.
we didn't evaluate, remember, we dropped Northborough because it's a regional district.
Yeah, now that's an
So you
excellent
can't
point.
compare.
I know what I was going after, and that's not correct.
Okay,
Okay.
so I would just say those should be, the budget should be FY 2020 all across.
Yeah.
And that, usually you can get that. I'm still working on Shrewsbury. I finally got them to post their actual approved budget. Yes. Since they still had a draft. But you can go into the school spreadsheet to get Grafton, Holliston, Shrewsbury, Millbury, Bellingham, Sutton, Westboro, Ashland. If you want me to go find the rest, well, I'll see if I can.
I was surprised. This is praise for our budget book and the fact that it's electronic. Our budget book is comprehensive and loaded.
It's
It's a
award-winning.
lot of work. It's award-winning, but it's got a lot of data, GFOA thinks that's great stuff. It's all there.
Yeah.
I went to the other towns, and some of them don't have anything beyond 2018.
So that's the challenging part.
Well, and
Some
the
of
school
them,
budgets, I mean, it's even worse. Like I went, I won't
yes.
say which district it is, but it was, the school budget was a 10-page document.
oh boy.
That was it. Nothing broken out. It was by expense area, not by line.
But
It's-
so.
it's useless.
This is an important point, though. So one of the data points that we're gonna wanna hit on is, say, percent of, the overall operating budget that is dedicated to schools. And we need to be able to say, okay, within our comparison communities, where do we rank? How are we doing? What are they doing? It's, for whatever reason, that's a data point that a lot of people are concerned about,
Yeah.
and will focus on. But I don't think we can really do that unless we're using the FY 20 school budget numbers
Right.
in the spreadsheet, right?
And that's what we have in our spreadsheet. So that's why, like, Grafton in here, it says 51.1%, and in our spreadsheet, it's actually 56.9.
I thought it was even higher than that,
But the other districts are, on our spreadsheet, are all over 50%,
Yeah.
except for Bellingham.
Okay.
And in here, very few of them are. So I think once we reconcile those numbers, you'll see we're actually right in there. And we still spend less per pupil.
That's such a
Just about everybody.
that's such a misleading percentage, though, because
Sure.
state aid and all
Right.
the other, businesses, and there's just so many things that go into that. But It's hardly
It's
useful.
terribly misleading and probably not a very useful statistic
Right.
for people, I don't think. But, as again Barry points out, you get all this money in, all that money goes back out, some of it's from the state. Some of it you're not getting from the state without the school system. So it's, that money can only be spent there,
Right.
the Chapter 70 money, so.
And I added a line to the spreadsheet that backed out the per pupil spending, backed out the benefits,
Oh, excellent. Thank you.
because that was a weird one.
Yep,
I don't think a lot of our people take benefits.
right.
Like, our numbers were low. We're still the lowest spending out of the group, but
So, that's
not by
another-
as much when you back out the benefits piece from the per pupil spending. I just thought it was a,
School budget doesn't pay the benefits. It's the municipal budget.
No, but when you factor in per pupil spending at the state level, when they do the numbers, they take into consideration benefits. 'Cause that's a cost
part
of
of the,
operation.
it's part of the calculation.
Let me confuse
So like,
the
for
heck
instance,
out
I
of
think it
this.
was, well, you look at it, my memory's not the best. But there was one town that had nearly, it was like twice as much as we spend on benefits. And when you backed it out, we still spend less per pupil, but it wasn't as big of a difference.
It would be interesting to know what percentage of employees that we have actually take our benefits.
We asked him that question,
You did
didn't we?
ask
That
that
was
question.
40?
Yeah.
Did he say something like, for that
Maybe
meeting
when-
that we had with him, did he say 40%?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it
it'd
was
be
less
good to
than
know
half,
on the school
for
side
sure.
specifically, how many teachers take it.
Yeah, it would be interesting to know the teachers, it would be interesting to know town employees, and then be able to compare that with other communities. I don't know how you get that data without calling them
Yeah.
and asking.
I just know that our
Why are
benefits
you asking
number
us that?
was low
Yeah.
compared to
I
just
have no
about
problems
everybody
asking
else.
Dan, he'll probably tell me. I
No,
think it's a-
Dan will get it, but is there a Dan in Holliston? I don't know.
Oh,
You know what I mean?
that's true, yeah.
Okay, so
Can't compare, but we can find out our number.
getting back to this, the number issue for the school budget for the fiscal year, this is sort of why I end up stopping where I stopped, on the benchmarking report draft. And I didn't get that far because I wanted to make sure, I was comfortable doing it with the municipal side, because that was, we were within a range of certainty there that I was comfortable with. It was just that in the, once I got down to the school budget, I wanted to make sure that we were using the numbers as near to date as possible. So you've got numbers on your spreadsheet that are FY '20?
Yep.
Okay. Can we plug those into the,
Some of them, yeah.
okay,
Like I said, because we're using slightly different
communities?
communities, I can I put one of you guys in charge of that? Moving numbers
Sure.
into there. So is this spreadsheet in the drive?
Yes.
It is.
All right, so Pam's gonna do that.
A question.
Yep.
Sister communities, I know you asked.
Yes.
You know, we looked at the ones that, quote, the state had told us are our sister communities.
Yeah.
I asked the state.
Mm-hmm.
They said, no, which ones do you want?
Mm.
You pick them. So I went to some other towns as I'm wandering around in here. Some of these towns, we are saying are sister communities, they don't list us as a sister community.
Which ones?
That too.
I'd have to look again, this is,
It's interesting.
hello, I think my name is, I need a name tag. My memory is shot, okay.
Yeah, I'm curious about that as well. I know that in my prior experience with them doing this in Newton, there's always sort of a subjective standard to what you consider to be a comparable community, because you can do it geographically, you can do it demographically, you can do it economically. They had one category where they were comparing their schools to other communities with a, quote, similar commitment to education.
Wow.
I don't know what that means. Right, I mean, I don't know.
A really good football team.
Right, I mean, yeah, yeah. you know.
Don't all
I
want
mean,
the
yeah.
best.
Schools who get their kids into Ivy League colleges, probably. So as I've been thinking about this over the past couple of weeks, I was initially very comfortable with the list of communities that we've got. I'm still very comfortable with it, but I do want to drill down. I would like an explanation from the administration and from DOR about what criteria they're using to determine that. And just looking at these, it's geographic, it's demographic, it's economic for sure. Oxford, though, when I go through the data, is sort of an outlier.
Yes.
They don't seem to do anything similarly to what we do. Their crime rate's really high. Their financial base is really low. The population's different. I don't see them actually, when I was doing this and going through and just doing the comparisons between communities and the rankings, I started to skip them.
Yeah.
Kinda, because I was like, oh,
Well, they're a mill town, and I
Right.
think that's probably what it is.
It's probably shorthand,
Here are all the
right,
mill towns,
right.
And to an extent, yeah, sure, but I think you're right. And we
they
didn't
have a
use them
similar
on-
commitment to being Milltowny.
We
like
didn't
do.
use them in our school side, and that's something we need to address in the draft, is that we chose the school comparisons based on geography. So the ones that we wanted were the ones that were kind of the closest to us. So that was the Shrewsbury, Westboro, Sutton. But then Holliston, Bellingham, and Ashland were chosen based on the combined effort yield percentage being similar.
Okay,
So that's something to put in the report too, that we made that decision.
yeah, that's
We did not choose
fair.
Northborough because they're a regional district.
right.
And that makes it extremely hard, even when you look at their percentage of what they spend. I mean, you're a TA. Yeah, what's your title, right? TM?
TM.
You're a TM in a
TA.
town that's part of a regional district. It's different. And there's a lot of, I'm sure, interesting politics around who pays for what. So it's really just not fair to compare with them. Talk about not comparing apples to apples.
Right,
And I'm
right.
not familiar with, Uxbridge is its own. Yeah, so Northborough, Oxford, and Uxbridge are not on our list. Those are the three that you guys have that we do
Northborough,
not.
Oxford, Uxbridge, okay.
Is it, for the purposes of the report, is it worth looking at whether we can reduce the number of comparators? I worry with so many comparators, they vary in so many different things. You worry the report's gonna end up with data overload?
Yeah, no,
Where-
I agree. So I started to do that myself, actually. So on the municipal side, I started to make notes about, okay, these are our core DOR communities for municipal operations, and this is who I'm comparing to here. But only for some things, right? So like
Yep.
in recreation, I was like, well, because they're geographically similar and contiguous, it is helpful to compare our rec budget to like Millbury and to a certain extent Shrewsbury, because we share waterways, we share certain geographic features. So yeah, there's a subjective element to this, which is why we're not just producing this and being like, here you go.
Yep.
These are the numbers. There's going to be an explanation of, okay, this is why we chose the communities we did, and this is why we found value there. But yeah, I agree with you. Like, it doesn't need to be everything for every single category. And we'll get into the report in a minute, but as we go through it, you'll see why I did what I did, and I'd like input from you guys on that, and additional questions to ask. And then we'll start talking about, okay, for each narrative paragraph that I've given in the beginning, there should be an exhibit to refer to. Here are the 5 communities that we're going to talk about for town manager salaries or town administrator salaries. Here are the 5 communities that we're going to talk about for comparison for special education spending, and figure it out from there and see what we think is the most useful. So we'll get that issue straightened out on the spreadsheet. Are there any other data points that we want to talk about that
Cost
we
of
might want to
living
revisit?
and the housing cost and percent property.
Which, what page?
The very first
First
page.
page.
Oh, okay, sorry.
That was a website called Town Charts.
Yeah,
I think it's the Cleveland Fed or somebody along those lines.
what does that number mean? Housing cost
It's an index of how expensive it is to buy, rent, lease.
Yeah, but it looks like QBR to me. It's, okay, there's a formula, I'm sure. We're a 157.8. Do I make the all-star team with that, or what's the deal?
Yeah, I don't know.
It's more expensive to live there than it is in Auburn or Bellingham, but Holliston is even more expensive than us.
So 100's probably the level,
We need to
like
know what
the
the state-
average
I was gonna say,
or
what's the state
the
average?
benchmark
That would
or-
be helpful to know.
So, but 100 would be that value, right? Isn't that how these things usually
Oh,
are?
okay.
Oh, an index?
Yeah, that's a good
Would
point.
it though? Because
don't
what's
know.
less than 100 then?
Below average,
Newark, New Jersey.
Wouldn't it just be easier to say what's the average?
right?
What's
Okay.
So how is this different than, say, what is it take? I'm assuming it's taking into more than home value and taxes. But I guess it
Well,
without
it's just
context.
housing cost index.
so it'll
So
include
not cost
rental.
of living. The cost of living's another one. So if you figure like the average, I don't know if that's the right word, but like
Baseline is
100 is
100.
baseline.
Right.
If you're below that, you're less than baseline in Massachusetts. If you're above it, then you're more.
Well, I can try to look that up and see what their formula actually means.
Yeah, I think it's useful. Again, particularly where we're talking about tax increases, it's always useful for, especially, I think cost of living is a good one.
The housing price index, well, that's a housing cost, never mind, forget it. I don't know what I'm doing.
But okay, we
TM
can-
with M being a capital M. Oh, jeez.
all right.
I don't know. I thought that might inform some of the.
No, I think it does. So
Yeah,
I
if we
want
just
to
link
keep
to
it
I
there.
think it's a useful number.
I think if we can link to the source so that people can understand the number, I think that would be helpful.
It's a mystery.
Yeah.
Housing cost index.
We need to understand what if 100 is average, is that average for Central Mass or Massachusetts?
Right.
I like
So
the number of seniors in Grafton is relatively low. 13.6% of the population.
As
Because
of-
we're not keeping them very healthy.
Is that 2020 data?
Yes.
Yes. That's lower than I expected. Can I ask about so about halfway down that front page where it says percent residential plus open space
Oh,
and the percent commercial plus industrial plus personal? Whoa. Like, we are single digit
yep.
there, like Ashland is the only one. How do we get that data? Like, what's the source for that?
That's the assessors. It's the number of parcels that are
Okay, so
classified
they're
residential.
it's by number of parcels, not
Correct.
acreage.
Correct.
Okay, so that might be something to, okay.
So
That's
we
a
have
little
9%
subjective.
of the
Right.
properties.
If you have a giant parcel.
No,
9%
no,
of
the
the
assessors
parcels.
go in and they assess,
Yep.
each town's assessors go in and they try, sometimes they use outside companies, but what they're trying to do is identify, in this location, what has that house sold for? What are the ones on this street, what did they sell for? And that's how they start to calculate their assessed value. They play with square footage, acreage, you know, I'm sure there are some neighborhood issues in there, but
It's all
that's,
sales data driven.
yeah.
But so these percentages are area though, right?
No,
This
that's
is
number of
percentage of assessed
parcels.
value? Oh.
Number of parcels that are residential.
All right, I think that probably
91%
needs,
of our parcels are
All right.
residential. 9% of our parcels are industrial.
I think it might be helpful to put that unit in there.
By dollar value. Well, it's, residential is, for Ashland, for example, is 2.5 billion. And,
These
open
percentages
space
are
is
just these
tiny.
numbers, right? They're just percentages of these numbers above, right?
Yes, exactly.
Oh,
So these
so
are
it's
the
value.
percentages of
Okay,
these
so it's not
numbers.
area,
Good
it's
point.
value.
No, yes,
Well, it's the parcels and then the value of those parcels.
it's the dollar value.
It's a dollar value.
All right, I
You're
thought
right.
it was area.
Good point.
It's not area.
Okay, so that might be something to,
And I hit on that because it's there, and also
Right.
because we often hear references to these 90-10 communities.
That's right. If
okay.
you ever hear someone talk about a 90-10 community in grave tones, what they're saying is, good luck. You're relying entirely almost on your residential tax base to fund
And that's
things.
basically us.
That's
We're
us.
91.9.
Yes.
That's right.
So is Concord.
Yeah.
Groton
Which-
is
which
95.5.
I'm sure your school numbers will show
We're
that,
95% residential,
yeah,
5% commercial.
But both of those districts you just mentioned are regional school districts too.
Yes.
yes. And the housing values, the assessed value of houses in Concord is astronomical.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when I spoke with one of the people on their finance committee, they said, that's the way we want it. We don't want more commercial stuff going on.
That's right.
Right.
Well, and so again, so that it brings us back to the whole point of this whole group is to say, okay, what do you want? You can have 90-10, you know, and I mention this to people who are big fans of open space and recreation all the time. Conserve as much land as you want. Just be aware that you're going to pay for it at some point, and you know, and it's going to keep coming. And the folks in Concord are very much aware. Yeah, we don't want no.
And I'm
Stinking
sure
industrial zones.
you saw when you did the school thing, the Carlisle, their average teacher salary is over $100,000.
No, we didn't look at them. Because they
I
were
wanna
outside
work
the
there.
scope of, yeah, they were
Yeah.
way outside of our scope.
They are
Yeah.
really good.
Yeah.
They spend a
faculty
lot more
there
per
is
pupil
very
than
good.
we do.
Yes.
But there isn't a single district in our spreadsheet that spends above the state average
Yeah.
per
that's-
pupil, per pupil.
That's
Even
interesting.
Westboro is slightly below the state average.
Okay. All right, so we've gone through median household cost of living, housing cost index, percentage of poverty, I think that's a good one. Residential values, okay, I'm comfortable with the top box here. Tax revenues. So the first box comes from the DLS Gateway levy limit report. I don't think I had any questions. I think the box down here for actual levy 2020 is interesting, but I don't think we're gonna get that data until the future. I mean, that'll be 6 months from now,
'Cause we're
Yeah.
not done.
right?
No, FY20 is set.
The actual levy?
Tax rate for FY20,
Oh, yeah, okay,
So-
you're right,
so
yeah,
the-
that's true.
the levy limit for FY20, you can get that.
I can go back in and see if they have it, but they didn't have it when I looked at
They
it.
may not, the DLS may not have all the updated towns, but every town that sends out that third quarter bill has their tax rate set, and the DOR has that information.
Maximum allowable levy, okay. Tax levy 2016, that was interesting. I think the tax levy change over the course of the past 5 years is a good number to have.
That was interesting.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. We're up there. Obviously, that was as a result of the 2014 override. Auburn, Bellingham, Paulston, Oxford, man, 8.6%. That's going nowhere.
Yeah.
So that's, Westboro's a little closer to us at 19.1, Sutton at 19.6, Millbury 21.4. Millbury's not terribly different. So that was interesting.
But again, when you have a bigger levy, the percentage change in the dollar that
Right.
equates to.
Right, that's
Like,
right.
Westboro was twice the size of us, so
Right.
they went up 19.1, we went up 22.2, but they went up a bazillion dollars more than we did.
Right. Obviously, single-family tax bill is important in there. We're missing some data points from Millbury,
Oh,
Shrewsbury,
what they
Sutton.
did there.
Come on, Barry.
Well,
There's names at the tops of these columns.
wait a
I don't
minute,
know.
that's Laura.
We've got a few missing on our school department one that we're
That's
still
all
working
right.
on too, so.
Good
Those
point.
are
That's
easy to
good.
get. Those are easy to
I'll
get.
go.
State aid revenue, this is a fascinating one. There are some communities done very well
Not
in
us.
Chapter 70. Not us.
Nope.
Yeah, I was surprised. I thought that would be, everybody would show the same
I
annual
thought so too.
change.
Ashland and Auburn too, for some reason.
Auburn had a big jump in student headcount.
Okay.
And ELL, I believe. That's not on our spreadsheet either,
Yeah,
but the makeup of the student body has changed quite a bit.
I don't know what the story is with Ashland.
The clockers.
Yeah.
How about Millbury, 2.2%?
That I don't know anything about.
And Westboro, 11.5. Come on, Westboro?
Yep.
Come
Well,
on, Westboro.
They have a lot of, so if we're assuming it's all, I'm gonna go with, again, I think it's gonna be ELL population.
Yep.
They get a big bump. They have a large ELL population. It's growing, and ours is very, very small.
All right, so that data is pretty instructive to be able to inform the community that, look, we are in the bottom percentile. The only communities doing worse than us for percentage increase in state aid over that time is Oxford, which is, again, I think is crazy. Oxford, Uxbridge.
Yeah.
These.
They're not too many families moving into those communities, though,
Yeah.
you know?
Do you guys have the Chapter 70 information in your spreadsheets?
I believe so. Thought we did.
Right. My thought is to make sure that we have the same numbers.
Yeah, we'll want to go through and double check and make sure that we're talking about the same things and cross-reference that.
I think we did not put that in because you had it. So, no. I don't see a chapter 70 line. I mean, I might have gotten rid of it because it was
Oh,
superfluous.
that's a big one.
Well, I took it out because you had it, so
Thanks for having our backs.
good job.
So how informative is the Chapter 7G number? You're looking at, say, the percent change over 5
Yeah.
years, and you say, well, look at that huge percentage change for Westboro, but without knowing the context, how informative is that number? So let's say
Right.
there is a huge influx of ELL students. There's cost associated with that.
That's true.
And so, without knowing the town's additional costs that led to this number, is it really very informative for our residents to say, well, we need to get less state aid, that's why we need to have an override?
Yeah, no, I think the take-home message for that data point is going to be, we get low state aid, not less state aid.
Yep.
We get low state aid, therefore, we need an override. So for instance, the data comparison point we're gonna wanna look at is the Chapter 70 change over 5 years. That's a 4.3% increase, but as we were just talking about, our tax levy change over the last 5 years is 22.2%. So again, where state aid isn't even trying to keep up with
Yeah.
what we're doing locally. So you're paying more out of residential real estate taxes, arguably a more aggressive system of taxing people. And, we're foisting the bill onto, people who sometimes are unemployed and people who are aging in place.
Yeah. The Westboro numbers for Chapter 70, if you look at the first 2 years on here, 16 and 17, there were only 5 million, where everybody else was usually higher. And what they're basically doing is coming up to what they should be getting.
That's another fair
Right.
point, right, yeah, that's true.
It's true.
That's true, because
Now,
we're,
my bias in putting those numbers in, or not my bias, but my mindset was, Chapter 70 is such a big, it's like a fifth of our budget. 12 million, give or take, 11 million, around there. And yet it has gone up for us at a very slow rate,
Right.
very small amount. And I know Reading and Moore come in and they try very hard to get more, and they say, we got you this, we got you $30 per student, which is really not much at all. But when I look at the other towns, I say, well, they seem to be doing better for some of the other towns. Not all of them. Some of them
Right.
are getting even piddly amounts.
It'll be interesting to see what the numbers look like for 2021 with the Student Opportunity Act. How many of these communities are going to benefit more
Oh, boy, Northbridge,
based on, you know,
yeah.
special education, based on ELL, how the formula changes.
Yeah,
Because it's true, our representatives can go in and they can ask for more money and they can fight for more money, but the bottom line is it's a formula.
yep, they have a hard time
And,
doing
and
that. Yeah.
the makeup of our community is such that we are on the losing end of receiving that funding
Yeah.
at this point in time.
Yeah.
We didn't see a bump the way that other communities will.
Now, when Tim was here, he was commenting about the challenges of using property tax as your primary base for generating revenue in the town. And then he said, but there's an alternative way of doing this. None of the other towns in the state do it. You'd have to change the charter if you wanted to do it. But he started to mention a different way of funding your town. And I
I know,
didn't
it's
catch.
taxing based on income,
Yeah,
basically,
local option income tax, yeah.
yeah.
Okay,
I
okay.
read somewhere that that's actually against state law.
It is, it's presently unconstitutional.
Okay.
You could do it, you'd
a long
have
shot.
to, there would need to be a statute to address that.
Okay.
Ohio does it. There are a number of states in the country that do it. So it's a conversation, it might be in the, when we eventually get around to our income analysis report, income structure report, it'll be something that we'll want to think about. So, chapter 90 stuff, a little bit all over the place, we're generally hover around 500,000, we got a bump in 2015 to 753.
That was known as the election year bump.
Right.
That's good.
Oh my goodness, it did. It happened across the board.
It was huge. Everybody got extra money that year.
Wow. How about that?
Wait, what year?
2015.
2015 going into the 2016.
Yeah, Ashland went from 456 to 698. Auburn went from 616 to 921. Bellingham went from 542 to 812. Look at that.
Everybody got more money that year.
Every year should be an election year. It's
Look at
fantastic.
Westboro.
But this is an election year. Are we gonna get a bump again?
Doesn't look like it. I would have come with fiscal year
They sent,
20.
we did get a little bit of extra money this year, not to that extent.
No.
Not to that extent. That was a huge.
Betsy
bump.
DeVos is going to close all the public schools and make them all for-profit charters.
Well, that'll make this
Okay,
exercise. beside the
police will
point.
come and take me away now.
So unrestricted government aid, that's, okay. Again, low. But it's 2.7%.
Almost exactly the same
across the
for
board.
every town.
I think that's basically the Baker administration's policy has been, because the Patrick administration did this up and down thing. When they got the money, they gave it. But Baker's a little bit more just steadily low. Get different philosophies, I guess, but that's what that is.
Thanks, Charlie.
Again, I think that's a data point where we just pointed out, it's not growing according to, what our budget is. But as far as rank amongst other communities, it's beside the point. Local revenues, We should probably take the out of
Oh, you mean other revenue?
other revenue.
I don't, what is other revenue?
It's Canadian revenue, I think. Other revenue, eh?
Hey?
That's awesome.
Other revenue could be ambulance receipts, it could be, community preservation money, it could be
What's up with
classified under a lot of
Shrewsbury?
stuff.
Other revenue.
Yeah, why do they
Grant
get?
money, could, other revenue is just a catch-all. You'd have to look at individual towns to figure out what that is.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
have
In Groton,
way
other
more than
revenue is
anybody.
ambulance receipts and,
Way more revenue than
conservation
everybody.
fund money.
They have their own electric, their own water,
And their own cable.
their own cable.
Yeah.
Oh,
That could
okay,
be the other
yeah.
revenue.
I used to live there.
Well, hey, I mean, municipal electric is a way that some communities have gone to generate revenue. Again, when we do income structure, if someone wants to take a look at that, we can talk about it. I don't know. I think you, not to go off on a tangent, but you put yourself in the position of charging your customers, be tempted to charge your electric customers a little bit extra money so you can pay for things outside of
Mm-hmm.
Proposition 2.5. I'm not sure that's the way to go, but okay. Expenditures, general fund spending. So again, general government, that's a useful data point that I talked about in the benchmarking report. And percentage of operating budget, I think that's important.
Are we comparing, wait a minute, I'm confused.
We're spending less?
No, you can't have an FY '20 operating budget and then a school budget in FY '18. and then
So that's the
compare
thing,
it to
right?
FY
So
'20.
Yeah.
we're discussing that.
Oh,
We're gonna
okay.
plug in the right numbers there.
Yeah.
I just woke up, so,
No, it's okay.
Welcome.
Pam's gonna take care of that
Yeah.
for us.
oh, that's right, we can talk about that, sorry.
It's all right.
And then
So-
we're just gonna, for now, delete the other ones for the the towns we don't have, and we'll try to track those down.
Right. So,
Larry, this is a lot of work, you did a great job on this.
yeah, seriously.
Well, thank you very much. I will stand up in front of the select board and get denounced once again.
Whoa.
It happens, man. It happens to the best of us.
So, all right, so I lost my headers here. What community is that?
Oh, you just, dude,
No, no,
I'm
it's
just
fine. I
sliding
just-
this up.
Oh,
See?
you're smart.
That's how I got on this committee.
No, it's not. You started the committee. That's how you
That's how I
know.
got on this committee.
All right, so it has no fire. Oxford has no fire,
Yeah.
but look at our expenditure on fire. We're the lowest.
We are. So again, this is another point, it's a data point that is useful to the extent that it's not useful. You point out that, okay, we can't even compare to our quote-unquote sister communities, our comparison group, because we don't have full-time fire. All these other units do have full-time fire.
Holliston.
Do
doesn't.
they?
I don't think, I thought Holliston was.
Billington, Auburn, Ashland do. Holston, you're right, doesn't. Northborough, I'm not sure what Northborough is doing.
Middlebury must not.
No, they don't.
But, so, where I was going with this is, if you look at the communities that do have it on here, and assume a higher percentage of our budget, average it out, right?
Right.
You're talking about an additional $500,000 or $600,000, actually more than that, it's another $1 million, at least, as a percentage of our budget, right, to get up there. So were we to have a comparable fire department to, say, Ashland, Auburn, Bellingham, you're looking at an enormous hit to the budget. Now, we're not doing that yet. We're baby steps into it. But Ray Mead came in and was talking about, okay, if you're gonna do an override, think about another $480,000. That's 3 full-time employees that they would need to be, up in the upper echelon of the department to run the department.
Yeah, because you're talking over 5 years.
That's right. That's right.
You bring these guys on 1, 2.
That's
3.
right.
Was that not included in the 5.5 though, when Tim presented it?
It didn't seem like it was.
Okay.
So that's something. And, again, when we do the municipal cost structure, we're gonna have to work with, Peter Carlson and Ray Mead and those guys already have their operating group to talk about their recommendations for the fire department study. So I'd like to meet with them, and get their feel for where that's going. But again, another useful data point. Human services, culture and recreation, fixed costs, question mark.
And what is that?
Is that, health insurance and debt service, or no? No, that's not. What is fixed costs?
That's a good question. All of these were on one of those DOR, DLS sites, all of those labels for police, fire, human services. I'm not sure what human services technically is. And I don't know what the fixed costs were, and they're substantial,
Yeah, they are.
so.
Okay. We should,
Define those.
yeah, I avoided that, data point and report, but we can define that and see if it's useful.
Looks like debt service.
It
Principal
seems
and
like it
interest.
should be.
Fixed cost would be debt service? Or debt service is below, I'm seeing it.
Oh, never
Yeah.
mind,
Yeah.
wrong again.
And again, that's an FY18 number
They're
against
the
the
same
FY20
numbers.
budget.
Fixed cost and debt services are the same numbers.
No.
Or
they're
at least in
not.
Holliston and Northborough, they were when I was going through.
I
real
think
quick.
probably, yeah.
I don't
But they're
see-
not.
Then it's
for
different in
regular-
Oxford,
Yeah, they're not.
or at least the percentages, but then, I don't know.
They're not.
I didn't find, I mean, a lot of these intergovernments, other expenses, I'm not sure how useful that stuff is. Debt service is a useful number.
Well, I was just more thinking, you know, if fixed cost is 10.3% of our operating budget. That's a chunk that I think we need to understand what that means.
No, I want to know what it means, but
Yeah.
I haven't.
I don't necessarily think it's a comparison point unless we get into it. I mean, we're on the low end on that.
I think for fixed costs, it speaks to flexibility. You know, what are we right off the top of the right off the top when you have your next year's budget? Here's what 10.3% of it is going to be allocated to.
Yeah,
What does intergovernment mean?
I thought that was transfers from
Enterprise
things like an
funds.
enterprise over
Enterprise
That's what it
to
is.
general, you know, because we're sharing some people. I thought that's what they were implying. Each of these really is what can be very fruitful for comparing one town to the other. If, for example, we can look at the public works budget and say we have X number of people, whereas other towns have X plus 12 or something along those lines.
Yeah.
If you can break it down, or they get paid $100 a week, whereas our guys get paid an actual living wage each week, so.
Okay.
So would adding a line for like population percent, like the population to the amount spent,
Yeah, per
that
capita
kind of
spending.
thing? Yeah.
Yeah. So I've been doing like napkin per capita as I'm going through this to try and understand what that is. We can do it as a separate column, or as we're writing, we can just kind of figure it out. It's up to you guys, whatever you want to do. I think per capita numbers are important because it goes right along with percentage of
It's
budget.
pretty ezy to add in,
Yeah.
though, and just,
And it goes with per pupil spend,
Right.
which is the
right,
number
yeah,
that,
that's true,
it's the easiest way to compare between the districts.
right.
Right.
Well, because it just will put into perspective some of this.
Yep.
Well, and you'll see how little money gets spent per resident on, say,
On
fire.
Okay,
Exactly.
okay.
Right.
You don't have to do it, Barry. We
No.
can
I
have
just
someone
looked
else do
at
it. It doesn't have to be you.
I just looked on our budget, and I compared the number that you're carrying here on fixed costs.
Yes, I know.
Retirement and pension, Medicare, group life insurance, group health insurance, that's what
okay.
those numbers are.
Ah, okay.
That's for which one, intergovernment?
Fixed
Fixed
costs.
costs.
Fixed
costs.
cost?
What was it?
Say it
again.
Retirement, Medicare, group life insurance, group health insurance, those are fixed costs. But then I look here, I don't see them anyplace else, so that has to be what it is.
Okay. Retirement pension.
So by fixed, they mean mandated.
Correct, you have no
Right.
choice. You gotta pay
Right.
pension, you gotta pay health insurance, you gotta pay
Ah,
property insurance,
okay.
you gotta pay FICA. So that's what that is. So that sounds like,
Where did you just mandated?
that sounds like what we classify as,
Benefits.
undefined.
Unallocated,
We classify it as unclassified.
Unclassified.
Yeah.
Unclassified is fixed costs.
Isn't that like a oxymoron?
That might be a suggestion.
I don't know why we just
'Cause
don't
I know
call
there
it
was some-
employee benefits, but I guess it's
Right, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, there was
benefits
some
and insurance is
talk
what it is.
about, it looked suspicious, right? It's called unclassified, because that seems like a great way to hide money.
Yeah, oh, jeez,
But
yes.
if you could state it as fixed costs, mandated costs, employee benefits, like some other label, you might save yourself a little bit of.
Yeah, I
flack.
saw that
Yeah,
Facebook
unclassified's not a
post.
good title for
Is
that.
that,
Yeah.
is that a requirement from the
Those
state,
numbers
though?
are all the same. If
What,
you
call
look
it
at 'em,
unclassified?
FY20
Yeah,
operating,
no, it's-
FY20
that's what we call
operating
it.
under fixed and debt
McGraw and I
services.
call it
For every
benefits
town,
and
they're the
insurance.
same. So what does that mean?
Okay.
I think,
What's the same? Sorry, Colleen, I was,
If you go to fixed cost and you go to debt service, if you look under the FY20 operating budget, they're the same for every community. The FY18 or the percent of the budgets are different, but the FY20 operating budget under fixed cost and debt service are all the same across the board for each community.
Isn't,
What does that mean?
Where are you looking?
that's how he's calculating the percentage. He just copied and pasted.
no, but why is fixed cost the same as debt service? Oh, under operating budget.
Operating
Oh, so,
budget.
Yeah.
oh, so it's just the operating budget number.
Oh,
So that's a
okay.
total
So it
operating
carries
budget
through
number.
to
So
every
we
I
need
see.
to fix,
category.
we
Yeah,
need to
yeah.
fix the areas and confirm that the debt service numbers, the other expenses, all this stuff, we're comparing FY '20 to FY '20.
That's right,
Yeah,
Same with
we
debt
will.
service,
Yep.
right?
So the operating budget is listed everywhere.
right.
I see.
The operating budget number should be the same under every category.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Yep.
Okay, so
Shrewsbury's 134.
I'm gonna wanna, okay, so one last big item that I wanna get to. And I think this is an important data point, capital planning process. I would really like to know how our comp communities are allocating expenses for capital improvement. Are they doing it out of free cash? If so, where do we compare in total dollars spent, and how do we compare as a percentage of the budget spent? And I'd like to know per capita spent. I think that's important. Like, what per person in Grafton, what is each person paying for roads? What is each person paying for building upkeep? Because if we are falling behind what other communities are doing and what our needs are, then it behooves us to address that with a different policy, because that's just, again, it's more expensive over time. But how do we can do it by looking at our budget book, but I don't know that DOR is gonna be helpful there. I don't think they're gonna help at all.
I wonder if this is something with, where we're not necessarily looking for a data point. I mean, it is
Right.
data, right? Is this something we get at during the municipal interviews? Do we send interview
No.
questions to the municipalities and ask,
Right.
hey, what does your capital planning process look like?
Well, we're gonna interview our municipal employees. We're not gonna interview theirs unless there's some data that we can't get online. And I think that's what's gonna come down to is calling discrete communities and asking them how they do this. And this is again where I think maybe doing 12 communities is not worthwhile.
Right.
And picking a few that we think that are. I would probably go back to, again, just the DOR towns. I wouldn't do Westboro, Shrewsbury. That doesn't make any sense. Remind me again. The DOR ones on here are Holliston, Northborough, Oxford, Auburn. I think Ashland's in there as well.
Ashland, Auburn, Bellingham,
Yep.
Holliston, Northborough, Oxford, Uxbridge, Millbury, Shrewsbury, Sutton, and Westboro.
No. The DOR compares us to Shrewsbury and Westboro?
You can select who you want
Yeah.
it to generate your report from 351 towns.
Okay.
My favorite is Cummington, Holland.
What was the
Holland,
first one? Is that a real town?
Cummington, it's a
Cummington,
real
yeah.
town, yes, apparently.
Holland popped up on our list too when we did the combined effort yield.
Doesn't
but the-
Holland have 5 people in it?
Yeah.
That
it
was the
does.
problem, the enrollment was so small. We were
Is that
like,
what that
yeah.
I
was?
think they're
Yeah.
just like.
Oh,
60.
yeah, because
Tiny.
their per capita spending was incredible. I was wondering, well, this town is wealthy.
Because we only
Like-
have 10
people.
Oh, yeah,
Something.
oh, that was amazing, okay, that's why. I thought I was looking at something on Nantucket, I'm like, oh, this amazing community on Nantucket.
I'm gonna
everybody's
move
a
there.
billionaire. No wonder I've never heard of it, I'm poor.
Nantucket has a $100 million budget, and they are looking for more people to volunteer to help out, because the ones they have now are spending a lot of time, and they're just aging out.
Right, and
So-
no one can afford to live there year-round.
Who do you want to know about capital for?
Let's talk about that.
Well, our core comparison towns, right?
Yes,
Ashland.
I mean,
Ashland,
Ashland's like our twin
Bellingham
town.
is super hard to get information from.
Yes, it is.
Auburn,
Holliston.
Holliston, Northborough, Oxford.
So the thing
So
with
we're not
Northborough,
comparing
again,
Northborough on the school side.
I was gonna
Sutton.
say, capital is gonna be
Oxford,
weird.
really?
Yeah,
Because upkeep of school buildings will
'Cause
be
you know what,
Yeah.
no,
combined.
I changed my mind.
No,
Millbury, I mean Millbury, I think,
Millbury, yeah.
but Oxford, we're just not.
No.
I wanna stay away from ones with major
Industrial?
industrial. So I guess if we look down to residential and open space, that would be helpful. So Ashland, Holliston, Uxbridge, Millbury. You know, Shrewsbury, yeah, but,
Did you say Millbury?
yeah, Millbury, and then Sutton.
So not Auburn, no.
I would still do Northborough,
Really?
yeah. I
How do
mean,
you handle?
I almost had their school stuff unwound, by the way, when you were like, we're not gonna do it. I was
Sorry.
like,
But how does that work when you, and Mark, you can speak to this, in terms of capital expense on the school district? Now, in Northborough's case, they're only combined at the high school level. So they have one high school that they maintain with another town. How do you suss that out of a capital?
The capital costs are developed, the district has their own capital budget. And
Okay.
they allocate the percentage based on the student population. So
Okay,
in Groton, we pay 77% of their capital costs, because we have 77% of the kids.
wow.
So if their capital budget in a particular year is $500,000, we pay $325,000. That's how it gets. And we have a separate stabilization fund to fund it.
Well,
Does that answer your question?
we're looking for two things, right?
That's a lot.
We're looking to see, do they have a capital planning process?
True.
And, you know,
Yes.
is it one of these 5-year, 10-year things, et cetera? And then the second is, okay, what are they, how do they do it? Are they doing ranking? Are they just saying,
well,
I don't know.
what's,
I'd like to understand how
wanna
we
know
do
where
ours. Do we know how we do ours?
we have an understanding. It's very.
I don't have an understanding.
It's, yeah, the department, there, apparently, here's how it works. There is a powwow or a group meeting every August with department heads where they go over and talk about what their capital needs are. They put in request forms that Colleen was nice enough to get for us. The department heads detail in the request form what they're looking for a capital contribution. Tim comes up with an itemized list that he brings to CAPC, says, here's my itemized list. CAPC says, I don't know what to do with this. And then votes yes, and then it gets passed. But the issue is, that process is one thing. It's all coming from free cash. And we only have so much free cash. As over, one of the other data points that's gonna be useful is over 5 years, our free cash amount has decreased. Are these other communities that we're talking about, are they paying for it out of free cash? Or are they paying for it out of a capital stabilization fund? That would be interesting to know. But regardless of how they're paying for it, is there, as a percentage of their budget, are we close? Are we investing enough of our money on a yearly basis to keep up with our capital needs compared to other people and what they're doing? It's, again, and you can poke all sorts of holes in that. Like, okay, well, maybe Shrewsbury doesn't need to because Shrewsbury has a new library, you know. So this year, their capital maintenance is going to be, you know, deceptively lower because they bonded that school and they bonded that library, and that's being paid for out of that. But their capital, they don't need to replace the roof on that, whatever. So it's hard to do, but I think it's important to know we're kind of making it up as we go with capital, very much so. And it's going to be, I think, important to get a handle now on how other communities are doing it, how much we're spending relative to other communities as a percentage of our budget and as per capita, and is this dollar spend enough? We have like this sort of weird. Matt often talks about it, like, you know, we just made up $1 million because it sounds like a lot of money. And then every year, $1 million becomes less and less money. And, you know, so now it's hard to, you know, build a new house for like less than $1 million. And we're talking about we're running the entire town's capital needs off $1 million. So anyway, I think that's important to get. So when we get around to doing the capital report, we have an understanding, okay, here are the key questions that this data is raising for us. And here's what we want answers to. Are we doing this well enough? Are we spending well enough? Are we spending enough on this? Do we need to redefine what's capital and what's not on a yearly basis? As, you know, and I got into this with the percentage of our debt. If debt's cheap and you can save money in the long run by borrowing and making something capital, do it. You know, go ahead and do it, and then, you know, save some money in the long run. So that's what.
Interest rates are good, it makes sense to do that.
Yeah, and they've been good for a while for
They have
municipal debt, right?
We just, I don't know who I told, we just did a $6 million bond issue, and the rates came in at 1.8% over 25.
Oh my God.
It's crazy.
It's like free money.
Ridiculous. It's awesome.
I'd like to
Well,
refinance my
hang
house for
on.
that.
Right.
the president is pushing the Fed to go to negative interest rates.
Huh?
So we get money for
Yeah,
borrowing money?
and that happens,
Sign me
yes.
up.
All right.
Yes,
I'll tell you,
please.
we
Yes.
got on that,
That's a
on
practice
that
in Europe.
$6 million
Now refinance
bond
your
issue,
house.
Yeah.
they gave us a $500,000 bond premium.
No
So
kidding.
the net cost to us was $5.5 million.
They're giving you money back.
They're giving us money back.
Wow.
So it's silly not to take advantage of
Ridiculous. Now is the time to borrow money.
that. Yeah.
But
Hear that, Grafton?
Yeah, but at the end of the day, you still have to pay for it.
Right.
And
So
so,
when you go out now, this town is going out, we met with the treasurer, Colleen and I met with the treasurer last week. Their bond advisors come and said, now's the time to permanently finance the town's portion of the library budget,
right,
the library construction. You're gonna get a very good rate on that.
yep,
Right now, so it makes sense. So, but you don't wanna go out and borrow money for replacing, pickup trucks and police cruisers and things like that. That you have to take out of your.
Right,
your
free
operating
cash.
capital, because the life expectancy of that stuff is 5 years or under, right?
right,
Yeah.
So you don't wanna, but on a fire truck,
Or a turf
or a
field.
dump truck,
right.
or a roof,
Well, that's a good question. I mean,
Maybe
a
you
turf
bond it.
field, it's a 10-year lifespan. Is that worth it? 10 years? I mean, where's the cutoff? Where's the breaking point?
well, you
An
can
HVAC.
borrow for 5 years, but you gotta pay it off in 5 years.
Yeah,
Right.
okay,
On those projects.
Right.
Schools and things like that, like a school roof, you bond over 20 years.
okay.
A fire truck, you'd bond over 20 years.
Wow.
A turf field, you do the bond for 10 years, because that's how much it's worth. What?
No, see, no,
Am I
I
wrong?
respect, love the concept of the turf field, because I used to run on them. And I hated running on the regular grass ones, because you're always twisting your ankle, et cetera, and I can't believe how the football players don't get hurt on those grass fields.
They're not 65.
But a turf field, it's turning out, they're not, older than that, my friend. It's amazing, I think it's wonderful that I'm not only awake, but I'm upright. Okay, most of the time. But the cost of maintaining turf fields is like double the cost of maintaining regular grass.
Yeah,
Now, there are tremendous benefits and safety issues and all that, but these guys selling the turf fields, I think there's an article someplace
there
just
was,
recently
yeah, and written in the
that says
Globe.
it is pretty darn expensive to run them, and you do have to maintain them.
People got really excited about it 15 years ago.
Oh, yeah, they were beautiful.
They were, yeah. I was excited about it, it's fun.
All right, so what's next, Mr.
Well,
Chairman?
what's
Yep,
the
sorry,
list gonna
so
be?
that's the
We'll
capital,
bring
that's the capital planning.
say it again.
Let's, the three of it, me, Barry, and Mark, discuss this week how we can go about getting that capital data.
Which towns are you using? Here's what I have. I have Ashland, Holliston, Northborough, Millbury, Uxbridge, Sutton, and Shrewsbury.
In Auburn.
Oh, you added Auburn back.
Yep.
So just do them.
Okay, I have found
That's like three-quarters of
information.
it.
I found the information about capital planning online in one of the budget books for the first town.
Okay,
I could not find similar information for almost all of the other towns.
okay,
I was stunned.
yeah.
I mean, I thought for sure they would have something very similar, something.
Do we have it in
No.
our budget? The clear,
Well,
It's in our budget.
we
Yeah,
have it.
there's,
Finding information that says this is our process, I had a hard time finding it. One town says, yes, we have a process, and we list our projects, and we have 120, no, now we have 70 of them in our, and we
Well, didn't
identify
you
the
say
funding
that
sources.
our bond was low compared to other towns? So maybe a lot of towns are just financing this stuff.
I mean, that could very well be, but everybody's gotta have some capital budget, because, they get the turnbacks, it goes into free cash, and they're gonna pay for something out of that, so I'm just curious as to, what their overall spend is.
so do you suspect that it's hard to find? Maybe they do it like we do it, where it's not necessarily a clear process. Is this a case where it might be worthwhile reaching out to the handful of communities with an open request and
Yeah.
saying, we are looking into this, are you guys interested in looking into it too? We'll all share all of our data.
Yeah.
And that really gets people to want to give information, because they might be thinking, oh, we'd love to get our hands on that information.
Yeah,
And it might just be coming up with, 5 survey questions.
That's what
and-
we did on the school side.
Yeah.
And we're already we got a response back from Ashland within 12 hours.
Wow.
So they want to see what we produce, but they were happy to, and we did that through Dan Gale, the director of finance. We had him reach out to his peers in the school districts and give them our questions. And so that's
So
worked out.
when
I do find that people like to
these
talk
other
about this stuff,
towns, I
too.
should say, I'm what? Barry Smith, Grand Poobah, or?
No,
Well, I mean, you're on the finance committee, so you
Okay.
can use
yeah,
that.
member of the Grafton Sustainability Commission, we'll talk about it. I'll send out emails to people, let people know that we're calling, and so they're not surprised. All right, just to,
Grand Poobah, though, I like that.
yeah, that's your new title. Okay, so free cash as a percent of town budget, that's easy to do, for us.
Oh, we're on the next page.
Yeah, I assume this free cash number is FY '20? Are these free cash numbers, plural?
Oh, you're on the next page.
Yep.
Yeah, and that came from one of the DOR sites. And
Okay.
I'll go back in and put more of those links in where I found it.
So I'm going to do two things on this when I get around to it. I will include the free cash number from DOR. I will note that we have a projected, well, no, we have a free cash number right now. And I will use town data when I describe the percent decrease in free cash over the past 5 years, if that sounds good to everybody.
Yep, I agree with that.
I want to compare apples to apples when I compare it to other communities, but I don't want to be given out, like, I hear Barry's concern, I don't want to be given a hard time when we're talking about our actual free cash number and relative to itself over time. So I'll use the town's numbers for that. You know, again, these numbers are pretty interesting. It seems like we're pretty in the middle, as terms of free cash as a percentage of our budget, so that's
Is
good.
there an amount that we have to keep as free cash?
So
DOR
no,
recommends 2% of your operating budget be free cash, 5% be stabilization, so they have standards at the Department
Right.
of Revenue.
And
I
we-
think it's 2% that
we do, we do reserves plus free cash equals our stabilization. They want it to be between 5 and 10 to maintain a bond rating. So yeah. You know, I know there's a way. People will be interested in this. These other comparison communities, what their bond rating is, might as well look that up.
Really? Is that public information?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yep.
I think we need to explain what it means too,
Sure.
because I think the average person,
We could ask Moneypenny.
like myself, doesn't.
Get it?
Yeah, it's your community credit rating.
Well,
It's, you
because
know.
we've heard for years that we've got a good bond
Got a
rating.
very good bond rating with AA+.
Your
It's a
bond
very good bond rating.
rating,
It's one tick below the best
Miss
bond rating.
Moneypenny?
Right, that part I read in the town budget book. But how do we compare to other communities is
Well, that's what
important.
we'll do, we'll get these other
Yeah,
communities with
that's
their bond
great.
ratings.
And then what's
Okay.
the like, what moves that needle, you know, like, what does it matter?
What are the contributing
And what-
factors?
And, like, is it worth it to
Budget
keep
fluidity.
super low debt to have a high, like, have a high rating, but then,
It's the community's
Not-
ability to pay is what they care about. They-
okay,
So they're looking at your budget fluidity, your ability to have a budget that can address things that come up. They're looking at your economic development in the community, they're looking at your cash reserves, they're looking at your operating budget, they're looking at the way you do your capital budget.
that's a lot.
If you look at a bond rating from either Standard & Poor or Moody's, you read that, you can see what they're looking at. I'll send you Groton's, you can take a look at it, and it makes sense.
and the value is, the higher your bond rating, the lower the interest rate you have to pay on
Because
borrowing.
people wanna buy your bonds because they know you have good credit. It's like going for a house like a homeowner. You got a 400 credit rating, you're gonna pay 37% interest.
Yes.
If you have a 700, you're gonna pay 2% interest.
Yay!
So just to run through the bottom portion of the spreadsheet real quick.
Pretty obvious too, you're specific, it's
Yeah, I came up 0 on,
No, I mean, there's some of this stuff that
Staff.
would be useful. I think some of the stuff that I'm not sure, because, you know, again, I want to get this report done, and move on to the real heavy stuff of, you know, cost structure and income structure and capital and all that stuff. So I was interested in drafting the report about, salaries. I was interested in drafting the report to know about, you know, how many of our sister communities have assistant town administrators.
that seems
So
to have come up as an issue.
it has come up as an issue. You know, there is such a thing as being undermanaged, and as a result of undermanagement, paying for services that taxpayers are not receiving as efficiently as they could if there was just another body in the office to be able to deal with that. So that's a thing, but at the same time, when we have choices to make about either keeping people or cutting people, everything's gonna be on the table. By the same token, I don't feel a need to go through and do police staff counts. I think crime per capita is a good enough statistic on that. Fire count, you know, again, I don't know how useful that's gonna be, public works staff count. I would rather stick to, you know, percentage of DPW in the budget. Capital as a percent of the budget, we just talked about, I would like to do that. Debt service as a percent of the budget, I think we've already got. So, other than those things we mentioned, I'm pretty comfortable with what we've got in here.
We're also doing, on the school side, we're also doing, at your request, superintendent's
Yes,
salaries.
yep,
I gave you all the manager salaries, right?
you did, thank you.
A point about that.
Yeah,
Tim gets X $1,000 salary,
yeah,
but he also gets some other
yeah,
entries.
deferred compensation and all that,
We'd
right?
have to ask for the actual contracts to see the deferred comp, mileage allowance and all that.
Yeah.
Is it
Just your own
fair,
base salary, it's a good comparison.
is it fair to
Okay.
assume that when we're going through those numbers that are reported as salary, that there's probably also some deferred comp in there and benefits like
No,
vehicle?
usually that's just the base salary
Okay.
of the administrator.
No, what I mean is, the stuff that, the numbers that you got, is it fair to assume that also they're getting this other stuff over here? So that's an apples-to-apples comparison.
I would say a lot of managers get mileage reimbursement, a lot of managers get deferred compensation. It's just a matter of how much that is. Some get a lot, some don't get
Yeah,
as much. I believe our administrator gets a pretty good deferred comp.
yeah, he does.
And it would have to reflect years' experience elsewhere, years' experience here.
Community's ability to pay.
Right.
Yes.
Right. I think it's, again, it's one of those data points, it's fair insofar as it goes, and to the extent that people have questions like, oh my God, this person's making all this money, well, this is the market rate for the person,
Yeah, exactly.
so, okay. You guys wanna talk about the actual report itself real quick? It's getting, what time is it?
Page 23.
See if we can wrap this up pretty soon.
I need to skip out at 8:30, sorry.
I do too, so we can. Yeah. So, just in going through this, the introduction, I want to put, obviously, a table of contents is going to go in here. I did an introduction so that people know what we're talking about.
This was well done, Ed.
Thank you.
Yes.
I just wanted to, again, point out right up front, benchmarking serves only as an introductory bar to the determination of whether Grafton is operating efficiently and implementing best practices. For the GSC, the benchmarking data serves only to raise more questions. And from the questions that this data raises, we're going to, again, move into different working groups about municipal cost structure. And by that, I mean expense. What are we spending money on? Municipal income. What are our income sources? Can they be expanded? Can we develop them any further? Capital needs. What are our capital needs? How do we develop them? How do we compare to other communities? And in comparing ourselves to other communities, what ideas can we come up with to do things perhaps a little bit differently? And then obviously school cost structure as well. So we go through all these and we'll make these comparisons that are going to raise questions that'll be able to inform our decisions moving forward. I did caution people again. All this data is only true insofar as it goes. We're not conducting individual sustainability commissions for every single community that we're doing to determine, okay, yeah, that data is a little bit different from our data. Let's break down their program and see what they're spending their money. No, we can't do that. We can compare ourselves to other communities, but also operate with the knowledge that maybe that community is not operating efficiently. So for instance, when we talk about teacher salary or any union salary, they say, well, this union over here that's similarly situated is getting X. Well, that's a fair comparison. But is that community, operating as efficiently as it could? Do they need an override? Are they going to be cutting other staff to support?
Is that a
that
data point that we should add, like
I don't think we can.
overrides,
Overrides in the past,
10 years or something?
overrides ever, I think,
Yeah,
might be an interesting
ever.
one to do. Overrides
Bellingham
ever.
just did one this year, right? They just
Including
voted.
failed.
And, it's funny, there was an interesting article in the Globe recently
How are you
about
gonna
how.
find that, though?
DOR has all that information.
It does?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
all on the
Even
website.
the failed ones?
Yep.
Yep.
I've
It's
seen
it's
a
super
table.
interesting.
Cool.
Somebody
Yeah.
put
That would be
together.
really useful information.
It would be. We'll include that. And in fact, I read this article in the Globe that said, well, overrides are slowing down. Like, well, that's because politically, we're just,
Suicide.
it's suicide. Yeah, we're
Yeah.
we're just having cutbacks.
Well, people look at it as a failure, and I think it's important to
That's
note
right.
that it's not a failure per se.
Right.
It's-
Right.
It can be,
It
but not
can be,
necessarily. Right.
but for a lot of these communities like us, it's not. It's just, you can't keep up with the cost of doing business with our limited income.
With 2.5%.
So so after getting through that, I did just a quick data summary because I want to give people sort of an executive summary of what we did and what the key questions are. What are our allocation decisions here? What are we finding that we're allocating money on that's differently than we're allocating money on that other communities? And what's our compensation strategy? Are we being fair with our compensation? Are we paying people based on what we deem the market to be? Are we paying people based on we want to hire this one particular candidate? Do we have a compensation strategy? Should we have a compensation strategy? Should it be changed if we have one? Then I get into the comparison communities. We talked about that a little bit already. Then we get into revenues for development, taxes, state aid, free cash, and then city town expenditures. We talked a little bit about municipal spending on non-school areas, basically what's going on here in the municipal center, right? Police, fire, public works. We found that public works is a little bit higher, actually, than our comparison communities. General government, again, that back office stuff, it was interesting. While neighboring Shrewsbury spends 1.5 times as much on their general government, Grafton compares favorably to DOR benchmark communities. Again, calling to question the recent assumption that, we're stiffing the municipal center in favor of the schools. Turns out maybe no, because it all depends on what the cost of running town government is, compared in this region and compared to our sister communities. Culture and recreation, this was interesting. The benchmarking data shows that Grafton spends significantly more on culture and recreation, 30% more than the average for the core of the benchmarking community. So I went through and I averaged what these communities were spending on recreation. Shrewsbury's a big outlier on their spending for recreation. But otherwise, over the average, and I included them in the average, we spend 30% more. It's neither good or bad, it's just a thing. We have Silver Lake. Other communities don't. Northborough's recreation spending is high. They've got a splash pad.
They've got a lot of programs.
Shrewsbury,
yeah.
Isn't Dean Park in Shrewsbury? That's gotta
Dean
be-
Park's in Shrewsbury, that's right. Yep, so, there's a cost associated with that, and we're spending, closer to the higher end than not. Executive municipal salaries,
Silver Lake is the reason I stayed here.
yeah.
For $50 for entertainment all
Dude, I
summer
don't have to
for my
drive to the
kids,
coast,
like,
it's great. I don't need to get a
No.
pool.
I hate the beach,
I love it.
so Silver Lake
Kids
is
love the
actually
beach.
palatable.
Yeah, that's
Because
exactly.
I can park right there.
There's no sharks.
There's no sharks. There's bathrooms, there's a
No
snack,
waves.
like I can just give my
Beaver.
kids $5.
What?
The beaver are nearby.
And
They
there's
might
water snakes,
nibble
but
on
there's
you.
no
Oh,
Yeah, the water snakes.
health insurance contribution
water
comparison,
snakes.
that's what I was missing. I thought that would be useful. How we compare with our neighboring communities for health insurance contribution. I'm not sure how we find that out.
You have to just call up the towns and ask.
Okay.
Goody.
Simple.
I nominate Mark.
Huh?
What?
Just, I heard it was simple.
That's what I heard.
Ask me what Groton is,
What's Groton?
70-30. See how simple that was?
There you go.
Yeah, but that's your own community.
Oh, I got you.
You're not on our list.
Oh.
So
So
capital
much
assets,
easier if I was, I'd have so much information for you.
capital assets and data is where I left off. Where I plan to resume would be going through the school side and then revisiting the municipal side on state aid, taxes, free cash levels, spending per capita, a lot of things we talked about tonight. For the school side, questions on portion of school, I can't read my own handwriting, god damn it. Of course,
That in minutes.
portion of the school budget as compared to other communities as a percentage of the overall budget. Spending per capita on schools, actually, I was interested to know spending per capita on schools versus per pupil expenditure. How is that different?
They've already done that.
Okay, you guys already have
They
that
got a
data.
great chart.
Oh, excellent.
But the chart I saw today?
Yeah, I
It's a
don't
great
know.
chart.
Teacher salary comparison as a percentage of our overall budget, teacher salaries as a per capita spend, and teacher salaries as an overall spend. When we were doing the discussion with the unions 3 years ago, I thought it was fascinating. Yes, we have a lower per pupil spend than Millbury. We spend more on a cash basis than they do.
What do you mean?
We spend more money. Our school budget's higher, but we have a lower per pupil spend.
Right?
We have more students.
We have more
We have
students.
more students
Yeah.
in the system. But we're that goes, I think that speaks to value. So you take those two numbers and you say, okay, We have more students, we're spending more, we have a lower per pupil spend, but our achievement is excellent,
Right.
Well,
you know, so
our achievement's good.
our
But we
achievement's
can
good.
back into the per capita school number from the per
Right.
pupil number.
Right. Admin salaries, I wanted to go through, percentage of, percentage of aides as employees versus other communities. Are we employing more, instructional aides in the classrooms as a percentage of?
Oh, the BLAs and.
We do have a higher, yeah.
That is
That's one
something
of
that
the,
went out to
that
the
was one of the
districts.
things from the radar report that it broke out.
Okay,
Yeah, but we also put that
But we
out.
send so many less out of district
Because we have more.
because we have
aides
them
in-
here,
So you end up saving money in the long run, because you're
For
not
sure.
paying transportation costs.
right?
And the
which are
report that,
astronomical.
the report that's been widely discussed by the organization that came in and evaluated our special education programs in 2019, I believe. June of 2018 was when the report was written. They simultaneously complemented the way we run special education and also called attention to the one-on-one in terms of expense and a concern around, are we really preparing students to become independent? And when you look at where the one-on-ones are, they're in the lower grades, and then as the kids move up,
Yeah, okay.
what should be happening seems to be happening. They're
Less
becoming
one-on-ones,
more independent
yeah.
as they're ready.
Yeah.
Right.
They can do away, well, not do away, because those people get reassigned, right?
Just from talking to Jay and looking at the way that the school budget operates, or the school department operates on special ed, they've done a tremendous job keeping it in-house and keeping the cost down.
It really is
It's
unbelievable.
amazing.
And
He's done a terrific job.
nobody can really figure out how we've managed to do this. Like, it flies in the face of convention that we have a
Well, it
high.
didn't happen overnight. It's been
No.
building up, and every year, you do a cost-benefit analysis, and you bring a program back into the district instead of sending it out. And I think Jay and his team has done a good job identifying those areas.
The fact that we're only sending 31 students out of district
It's amazing.
is unbelievable to me.
And how many kids are in our district?
3,100.
That's shocking.
speaking of that,
Shockingly low.
that's another data point we'll get into, special education, percentage of students being sent out of district, kept in district. We'll go, you guys already have all this
Yeah, it's
data,
all
so
in
it's
there.
gonna be super easy.
Yeah, it's-
Yep, it's all in there.
Okay, so the other things that were on the agenda, we were going to talk about our interviews with Jay and with Tim. I think we should bump that because we're not quite done with this. But I would like to set up a short turnaround meeting to finish up this report, talk about voting on a draft within a couple of weeks, if that's okay with everybody.
So we'll meet 2 weeks from tonight, which is
Yeah.
the 12th?
12th. Amy, would you be so kind as to send me another agenda and book a room?
Can
Thank you so
I-
much, because
can we
I will
approve mi-
forget.
Can we approve minutes before we?
Yes,
adjourn?
let's do that.
Move to approve the minutes from the last meeting.
Second. Is there any discussion?
I read them, they're good.
Yeah.
I read them, they're
They
good.
were,
too.
they were fantastic, Amy.
All right, thanks.
Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second? Anyone second?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you, everybody.
Aye.